Hi, first grade. This is your math video for March 27th, Friday. All right. I'm going to turn this down here so we can focus on what I have here. We're going to be working with shapes and angles and vertices. So the first thing we need to do is get some materials. I have straws that I cut into different lengths. I need you to pause your video and find something in your house that you can sort of lay out to make shapes with, okay? It could be anything really. Make sure you have different lengths, okay? Make sure you have maybe, let's say, 10 or 12 of them. And if you're not sure what to get, you could definitely go to the packet we sent home and pull out pencils and crayons, and you could line those up to make shapes, okay? So go ahead and do that. All right, now that you've gathered your materials, go ahead and take 3 or 4 pieces, depending on what shape you want to make, and go ahead and lay them out in a shape. I have pins here holding mine down, but you don't need to do that. So go ahead and make a shape. After you've made a shape, take out your notebook and a pencil, and you're going to draw that shape. I'm going to use a whiteboard here, but you can use a paper and a pencil. Now, as I draw it, I want to make it look as realistic as I can. I'm going to look at those angles and try to make them match as closely as I can. I notice this one is pretty close to a right angle, so in my drawing, I'm going to make that look pretty close to a right angle. And then I want you to write 3 things. Write the name of the shape. Mine's a triangle. Yours may be something else. Okay, write the name of the shape. Then label 2 things. I want you to label a vertex. I'm going to pick that one. Vertex. And then I want you to label an angle. Okay. So remember, we can show our angles by putting that little curved mark in there, just to indicate that that's what we're measuring there. And I'm going to label this angle. Okay. Now, I want you to clear off your shape, move to a blank part of your paper, and do that again by making a different shape. Okay? For my second shape, I made a rectangle. Remember, I'm going to draw that, try to make it look as accurate to real life as I can. Okay, I'm going to write down 3 things. Again, the name of the shape, I'm going to label 1 vertex, and I'm going to label 1 angle. Word's a little scrunched there, but you can probably see what I'm doing. All right. Great. We'll spend a minute now reviewing angles, which we talked about on Wednesday. Remember, an angle is when you have 2 lines or line segments that come together. The angle is the space in between them, and we have ways of measuring that. We won't really talk about how to measure them in first grade, but so what I want you to do is take 2 pieces of whatever it is you're working with, pencils or crayons or whatever long skinny object you found. I want you to make an angle. Set them up so that they meet, so they create a vertex, that's the point, and they create an angle, the space in between. Okay. Now remember, we talked about how there are different size angles, and the one that we really worked on was a right angle. I want you to go ahead and try to move your pieces so that they are making a right angle. I'll give you about 5 seconds to do that before I show you up here. All right, so with a right angle, remember, we want the angle to look like the angle that we see in squares and rectangles. That's why they're sometimes called square corners. So I've moved mine to make a right angle. I can't really be exact, but we're going to try to get as close as we can, okay? Now I want you to open up that angle to make it bigger than a right angle. There you go. That is not a right angle. That's not what we see in squares and rectangles. Now I want you to close it down to make it smaller than a right angle. There we go. That's too small for the angles that we see in squares and rectangles. That is smaller than a right angle. Okay, the next thing I want you to do is to make, let's say, 2 or 3 shapes. If you can do 3, that's great, but if you don't have enough materials, just make 2. Make 2 or 3 shapes that all have 4 sides, but try to make them different from each other, and I'll show you what I mean. So I went ahead and made 3 shapes, and as you can see, they all have 4 sides. They're following my rule. And now what I want you to do is to look at your shapes and see what's different about them. So as I look here at my shapes, I'm going to look at these 3 shapes and see what's different about each one of them. This one looks like a square to me. It has right angles, and it has 4 sides, and all of those sides are equal in length. As I look over here, I have a rectangle. Okay, it also has 4 sides, it also has 4 right angles, but the difference here is that 2 of the sides are shorter and 2 are longer. As I look at my third shape, I notice some very different things here. Okay, I have 2 long sides, 2 short sides. I also have angles that are not right angles. So that's what's different about them, okay? Take a look at your 2 or 3 shapes and think to yourself, how is each one of your shapes different from the other ones? You can pause the video and do that. Okay, now we're going to just change the rule that we have here. All right, so clear your shapes off. And this time I want you to make 2 or 3 different shapes that all have 3 sides. All right, go ahead and okay, so I went ahead and made 3 different shapes that all have 3 sides, and here they are. Make sure they all have 3 sides. That's right. They're all following this rule. Now, again, you need to look at your shapes and think about what's different about each one of them. All 3 of these shapes are different from each other, even though they all have 3 sides. As I look at this one, I notice that all 3 of these sides are equal in length, but that's not true about this one. Okay, so those 2 are different in that way. This one has 3 sides that are all the same in length, are equal in length, and this one doesn't. As I look at this one, I notice that 2 sides are the same length and one's shorter. I also see one of our special angles in there. This is a right angle. Okay, so this one has a right angle. As I look over at this one does not have a right angle. So that's another difference. Okay, all 3 of these angles are smaller than a right angle. That's right. Now, as I look over at this one, I notice that this one does not have a right angle either. And actually, it has an angle that's bigger than a right angle, and that's different from the other ones. This is the only one that I have right here that has an angle that's bigger than a right angle. So those are just a few differences that I found in my 3 triangles. Okay. Now we're going to continue doing this by continuing to change the rules. Okay. Now I want you to do this with shapes. Make 3 different shapes that all have at least 1 right angle. So they could have 1 right angle, or they could have more than 1 right angle. At least 1 right angle. All right. Go ahead, make your shapes. Make 2 or 3 shapes and make sure that each one has at least 1 right angle. They could have more than 1. Go ahead. Great. I'm not going to demonstrate for you this time. This time I want you to work on it on your own. Look at your shapes, each of which have at least 1 right angle, and think about yourself how they are different from each other. You can pause the video and spend a moment doing that. All right, now clear all that off, and I'll give you another rule that your shapes should follow. All right, this is your next rule. Make 2 or 3 shapes that have sides that are equal in length. Okay? When you've done that, you can pause the video and think about, and look at each one of them. Think about how they are different from each other. And here's your last one. I want you to make 2 or 3 shapes that each have at least 1 angle that is bigger than a right angle. So for example, remember our right angles are the types of angles we see in squares and rectangles. We need each of the shapes you're making now has to have at least one of their angles be bigger than a right angle. So opening wider, having more space in between. Go ahead. Okay, first grade, nice job with that. Over the weekend, continue looking around for vertices and sides of shapes and angles in the world around you. And if you haven't yet, make sure you spend some time on IXL working on the skills under two-dimensional shapes. All right? Okay, keep working on that, and we'll see you back here soon.